Welcome back to the Legacy of Love podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Eckline, and today we're exploring the power of our words, their impact, and how a single letter can leave a lasting legacy. I'm so excited to be joined by Blake Brewer. He's the founder of the Legacy Letter Challenge, and Blake is on a mission to help 1 million parents write a meaningful, lasting legacy letter to their loved ones. His work has touched thousands of lives, helping parents, grandparents, and mentors put powerful words to paper, words that can be cherished for generations. Blake's journey is inspiring, and his passion for helping others leave a legacy of love is truly remarkable. His insights have been featured on NBC's Today Show, and today he's here to share why this practice is so important, how to get started, and how you can craft a letter that will truly make an impact. Before we begin, I want to offer a trigger warning. In this conversation, Blake shares his deeply personal story of losing his father and witnessing his drowning, an experience that really shaped not only his life, but his mission. So, if you're listening with young children or if this topic is too sensitive for you, you may want to skip the first 10 minutes of the interview. So, whether you're a parent or a grandparent or simply someone who wants to leave a meaningful legacy for your loved one, you won't want to miss this episode. I hope you find this conversation as impactful as I did. Blake Brewer, welcome to the Legacy of Love podcast. I'm so happy you're here with us.
Hey, Sarah, I'm glad to be here too. You got a really cool thing going on here. So excited to be here with you.
Yeah, likewise. I can't wait to dive into all things legacy and the important work you're doing. So, before we kind of dive into Legacy Letter, I would love for listeners to know your personal story of what brings you to this work and why you're on a mission to reach over 1 million parents.
Yeah, our mission is to help 1 million people write at least one well-written, impactful, lasting legacy letter. Never in a million years did I think that this is what I'd be doing in life. But my dad did something pretty incredible for me when I was 19 years old. And so we were on a family vacation to Hawaii. And my whole family was there. It was my mom, my sister, my brother, my grandmother. And then the first day there, we decided to go snorkeling. And so it's just me and my dad out in the water. And there was nowhere else I wanted to be than right there with my dad. Like I was just really fortunate. I had a really good dad,
Mm.
not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And through all of his imperfections, he was still my hero. My dad was in hospital administration, but his main claim to fame is that he was Terry Bradshaw's tight end. Sarah, do you know who Terry Bradshaw is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people do, but sometimes people don't. But at Louisiana Tech, my dad was his tight end. And so my dad caught Bradshaw's first ever collegiate touchdown pass. I have this really cool picture of my dad and Bradshaw and President Nixon in the Oval Office
Wow.
right before the 1970 draft. So my dad was a very humble guy. So he like hardly ever told anyone that he was Terry Bradshaw's tight end. I told everybody. It was my claim to fame growing up. So there we are out there in the water, and we just kept going further and further out. And we ended up in an area that I now know is called Witch's Brew. And Witch's Brew is known for its treacherous waters, and it was that day. And so there was this moment where I realized I don't know where my dad is anymore. And so I'm scanning the water looking for him. Where'd he go? Where'd he go? And then I saw him. And I remember thinking, okay, good, there's my dad. Except not good because he was struggling.
Oh.
My dad was attempting to get out of the water. There were some rock bluffs, and there wasn't a good spot to get out. But the one place that he tried, the waves were just crashing against it. And sure enough, wave crashes against him, knocks him back down in the water. I swim over there as quickly as I can. Can't find him anywhere. Now I'm exhausted. And the only place to get out is the same place my dad tried. And so by the grace of God, I was able to get up in between the waves. Now I'm standing on top of this rock looking for my dad, and I see him, and he's still treading water, but he wasn't doing good. And he looked up at me and said, "Blake, I need help.
Oh.
I need help." And he had this really big, deep, booming voice. But this cry for help just sounded like a soft whimper. And so I
Oh,
turned around and faced the shore and just waved my arms, yelling as loudly as I could, hoping that somebody might see me. They looked like tiny ants. That's how far away we were. Turned back around to my dad, and I had a decision to make. Am I going to just stand here? Am I going to jump in? And I knew I couldn't stand there. So I jumped in after him, swam to him, and by now he's underneath the water and he's unconscious. And so I dived down, I wrapped my arms around my dad, I bring him back up to the surface and began to swim with him to the shore. But I had to go around that rock, and it was probably like a minute into it where I was like, there's no way I'm gonna make it. And a nearby snorkeler showed up and began to help me get my dad to the shore. And then the lifeguards showed up and they put him on a surfboard, brought him the rest of the way in. They started doing CPR, and I'm standing there next to him, and I just felt so helpless. Like, what can I do? And I did the only thing I knew to do. I just cried out to God, God, would you please save my dad's life?
mhm.
And I really thought that at any moment that he was going to come to, that it was going to be like the movies, and his eyes are going to kind of flicker open, the water's going to spew out of his mouth, but it never happened. And so my dad drowned. And it went from one of the best days of my life to the worst, just like that. And now I'm standing there next to my dad's body. Like, what the heck just happened? Like, we were just in the water a few minutes ago, and now my dad's gone forever. I remember asking myself some questions. How are we going to make it without my dad? How am I going to make it without him? So, fast forward a few hours, and now we're back in the condo. And I just called my dad's parents, who were absolutely devastated to learn they lost their son.
Wow.
Called my dad's work, called our church, called some family friends. My mom was in no condition to make these calls, so it was on me as the oldest son. And obviously, I'd never had thought for a second I'd be making phone calls like that. And so I go to the back bedroom, and I'm sitting there on the edge of the bed, still just in shock. And my mom appeared in the doorway, and she said, Blake, I found something in your dad's briefcase, something that I know he was going to give you on this trip. And so she walked across the room and she handed me a letter from my dad. And I
Mm,
began to read this letter. And Sarah, it was everything I needed in that moment.
mm.
And I could still hear his voice, like reading this letter.
Oh,
And just a sense of peace came over me. I felt hope that I was going to make it. And then I felt incredibly loved. Like, do not tell me that my dad did not love me. He took the time in the midst of his busy schedule with everything going on to put it down on paper. I get to the last line of this letter, and my dad was a man of faith, so I wasn't surprised that he wrote this, but I do believe God allowed him to write it. He wrote, as you are being faithful to God, you're often going to find yourself in the minority here on earth.
mm,
But I can assure you, in heaven, you'll be in the majority. Love your dear
mm.
old dad. And I remember thinking, I'm going to see my dad again.
Oh,
And so I can't imagine my life without this letter. In the coming days and months and weeks, as I was grieving really hard. I'd never felt so much pain in my life. And I just missed my dad. I remember even as I went back to college that next fall, just every night in the dorm room, just crying myself to sleep, just missing my dad, reliving that day. And there's some things that I could have done as I dealt with this grief and this pain. I could have run to drugs or alcohol, or I could have
hmm.
built a narrative around this that could have left me bitter at the world and bitter at God and just kind of a victim. And it was like
Yeah.
the exact opposite happened. I grew more as a person, grew more as a leader, grew closer to my family, grew more in my faith. I would say than any other 12-month stretch of my life. I found purpose. I knew that I wanted to serve God and live for other people. It made me realize how short our time here on earth is. And then I was like, man, I want to live for things that matter.
Yeah.
And I had some professional counselors tell me, like, Blake, you've grieved this in a very healthy way compared to most people. I'm like, yeah, it's because of what my dad did for me. Like,
Mm.
He wrote that letter. He gave me the words that I needed. He gave me his voice. And so at the darkest moment of my life, my dad was there for me, like my hero. That letter, it was so much more than just a letter. It was through that letter he gave more of himself to me.
Mm.
And so went on, got started in my career, got married, started having kids. Yeah, so we have Gracie Kate, who's in third grade.
Mm.
It's kind of a mouthful, so we named my son Bo. And then Brooks, he's 4, and then we got a 5-month old.
Oh.
And man, I feel so blessed. Like I love being a dad. I love my family. But for the last 20 years, there's been some incredible highs. There's been lows. There's been times where there's been stress. There's been times where my wife and I are in a big fight over something. And in
Yeah.
all of those times, I would find myself going back to my dad's letter and allowing him to speak to me. And every time, like my dad got me back on track and reminded me about what was most important. And so when I was sitting there a few years ago thinking about, what do I need to do here to speak into my children's life to make sure they really understand how much I feel about them and how much I love them, it's like, oh, well, I got to write them a letter. Like if anyone knows the value of a letter from their dad, it's me. And so I wrote this letter. It was really overwhelming looking at a blank sheet of paper. Like, what the heck am I about to write? Knew I had to finish and powered through, finished it. And it was unbelievable. The feeling that I felt, like the sense of peace that came with having this letter done, but also the process of writing it just really helped me think through what I wanted to be true of my family. Like my biggest fear in life is that I get to the end and I'm on this kind of mountaintop of success. Oh, I made it. And I look around and there's nobody with me. And the people that I care the most about are over on a different mountaintop. And it's like, shoot, I missed it. And so one of my mentors, he said, he was a really successful business guy in Nashville. And he's at one point found himself coming home with a pocket full of money to a house full of strangers.
Mm.
And so this letter I found, it got me on the right track as I was writing it, helped, make sure that I was on the right track for what I really wanted in my life. And so it was through this process that it hit me like, okay, this letter was life changing for me. It's been now life changing for me to write it. And at that time, I met a couple other people who had received a life changing letter from their parent. So I'm thinking through this and I'm like, okay, y'all got a letter. I got a letter. Man, we got to help more people get this letter. And so that's where our mission started, to help 1 million people write at least one letter. I hope we go way beyond a million.
When did this start?
Yeah. So
I'm curious.
yeah, it was about a little over 4 years ago.
Wow.
I've been doing this full time for the last 4 years, and we've helped
Awesome.
tens of thousands of people write the legacy letter, which I call it the greatest letter you'll ever write because of the impact that it has on your family. And I believe everybody has a legacy letter in their heart. We just got
Oh
to get
yeah.
that letter out of your heart to your mind, to a piece of paper. Easier said than done. And then the trick is to make sure it's in your children's heart. And so like some of the things that are in this letter, like we say it to them, but it's like right now, my kids and your child, like, do they really understand? Like, we love them. Like, we love them so
Yeah.
much. But do
Yeah.
my kids really know how much I love them? No, they can't. They can't even comprehend the depth of my love for them. But the more that they understand that, the more confident, the more successful, the more resilient they'll be. So it's my job to help them understand the depth of my love for them. And
Oh,
so writing this letter is one way to help them understand that.
I love that. So much of this journey and having this podcast has been inspired because I am a mother. It's brought just a whole new level of depth and meaning to the work that I've, been doing for over a decade. And I feel it that much more deeply. And so, especially for our parents who are listening, when we're really reflecting on our legacy, I mean, sure, our estate plan is an essential ingredient, but it's not everything. And that's so much of where the language that I use is like, we want to really be intentional about not only that the legacy that we leave, but the legacy that we live. And so I love this letter, this intention that you're putting behind. And I think it's just so in line with, from the hundreds of families that I've served, that I've worked alongside, the ones that I saw worked, things went well, things went according to plans, and the family was left in a stronger, better place. And there was that foundation of love, and that was kind of instilled in the relationships in that family unit. And then the ones that where things didn't go well, things weren't expressed, things were pretty dysfunctional. And I think that while we're alive, while we're here, and especially if we have little ones, the best thing that we can do is really be thoughtful and intentional, and not just approaching this area as like, oh, let's just check it off the list of things to do. It could be so much more. So how you're reaching people, how you're speaking to people, it really meets people where they're at and parents where they're at. And I can definitely say, having a toddler, like, there is so much, life can be so full and busy. So the work that you're doing, and your story, I mean, that story, I'm crying as you're telling me. I'm so sorry for what you went through. I mean, talk about what trauma. And I think our ability as humans to rewrite a story. And I just love how you've just taken this torch from your dad and kind of carried that not only for your life, but for your children. I mean, that's a legacy of love, and it's inspiring. So I applaud you and the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. I could have, because this kind of traumatic event in my life, I there's no way I could be doing what I did. Without my dad's letter, I wouldn't be in a state of mind to be able to be looking outward to serve other people. Like my dad put me in a position to do that. But I was gonna say my dad had life insurance, and so his estate was taken care of. My mom didn't have to go back to work. We didn't have to sell our house, and I didn't even honestly know how important that was until
Later.
till later.
Yeah.
And I thought about, wait, what if he hadn't have done those things? And now all of a sudden, like, we're having to grieve the loss of my dad, and at the same time, like, sell our house, and my mom's got to go back, like, and take care of the financial stuff. Like it would have been really hard.
Yeah.
But I also say this, like, I know the value of my dad's life insurance, so you could put a number on that. The letter that he wrote, like, you can't,
Yeah.
it's priceless. And so there's, as I've talked to different people, it's like, yeah, you're the money that you've saved up, and you want to pass that down to the next generation, but without the love and without the
Yeah.
values, it doesn't matter how much money. It's almost like, I don't want your money. Like, if there's no relationship there, if
Yeah.
there's no love there. So
Yeah.
it really, in
It's
my
so
opinion, goes
true.
hand in hand.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I've had Deborah Price. She's a money coach, and she anyways trains money coaches. She has a whole institute, and that's one of the things that she says, in order to really leave behind a legacy of love, is you've got to have both. You've got both the wealth and the money. You can't have one without the other, and how it goes hand in hand. And I've seen firsthand, I've administered and continue to administer estates where you can see that what came with that money is a lot of strings attached, a lot of expectation, not a lot of love, not a lot of really meaning and understanding. And, that really impacts people's lives and generations, where there's just kind of only pain there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why the legacy letter, like, it's an opportunity. Like, some of the things that we want to say and need to say, to be honest, it's kind of hard to say in person sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
it's just hard. And or maybe you want to have a conversation, and next thing you know, they respond to something you said, and the conversation goes sideways or whatever. Now next thing you know, you're off track. But when you write a letter, it's like, okay, you're able to put some thought behind it. This is exactly what I want to say. They can read it. And there's people who've written this letter, and it took some time for their children to read it, and then they had to come back to it, and it took some time to, like, work through some of the things that were said. But almost every time, it strengthened the relationship. So sometimes people are writing to people that, the relationship's pretty good, and then other times people are writing this letter to children that are estranged.
Mm.
I've helped a lot of people write that letter, and I encourage those people, man, that's awesome that you're here. You're not alone.
Yeah.
There's record numbers of people experiencing parental alienation in this country.
Yes.
There was a dad recently, and he said, man, I haven't seen my daughter in 4 years, and this letter gives him hope that his daughter's going to come home. And so, whether relationship is good or not good, you're often wondered, like, okay, what can I do here? Like, give me something to do, especially I'll say moms and dads, but especially the dads. And you're like,
Yeah.
man, give me something intentional to do, like something, and so writing this legacy letter is a way, like, you do intentional things at work, but it kind of can be vague when it comes to parenting. And it's like, hey, here's something you can do. You can write this letter, something physical to do and to give to them.
So you offer kind of the framework and that's free of cost, right?
Yeah. You want to talk about it?
I would love to. I've looked at it and I love it. It actually, a few things came to mind, but let's kind of dive into it for listeners that don't know you and this work.
Yeah. So we've kind of put together this outline of all the things that it helps people communicate the things that they want to hear, but also the things that your children really need to hear from you. And so there's the intro section. You're setting the stage. Hey, here's the letter I'm writing. This is why I'm writing it. The next section is the apology section. And so we just say, hey, there's been things that have been said and done that have hurt, maybe have wounded, maybe not on purpose. But again, this is how powerful our words are in our children's lives. So, like, there's some words I could say to my kids today that could wreck their life, to be honest.
Yeah.
And Sarah, you could say those same exact words to my kids, and it might hurt their feelings a little bit, but they're going to be able to brush it off. But if I
Yeah.
say it because I'm their dad,
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to go get a counselor. But on the flip side of that, there are some words that I can say to my kids that can bring them confidence and hope and be more resilient, like nobody else on the planet can. But we got to make sure they can receive those words. And so if there have been some words that have hurt, back to that, like something like you might say something that you didn't even mean for it to hurt, but it did. And so it causes a wall to be between you and them. And so we got to break down the wall. That's what the apology section does. And so this is really important to do it well. Some people do a general apology. Some people have more of a specific apology, like they got some things they got to get off their chest. So we help people do that. And then the next three sections, we're answering some questions. And I tell people this is the most three important sections of the letter. And feel free to stop me at any point. The first one is, how do you really feel about me? Is where you're communicating, I
Mhm.
love you. And in this section, you're really trying to help them understand the depth of your love for them. Your love for them is unconditional. The next section is, are you proud of me? And so you got to let them know, hey, I'm proud of you. I'm proud to call you my son, my daughter. And we're really focusing on not what you've done, but who you are. Like, who are you deep down, knowing that the things that you affirm them for, that's what they're going to repeat. Like, you're sending a signal. Hey, that right there, that was good. Keep doing that. And then I believe in you. So, they're all wondering, hey, do you really believe in me? And so when somebody has somebody in their life, really anybody, but especially their mom or their dad, believing in them, I tell people, both my parents did this well for me, but it was my mom. And you'll appreciate this since you're a mom. But she looked at me a couple times in my life, I remember, and she just said, Blake, I don't know what you're going to end up doing in life, but I know that you're going to be successful.
Oh,
And I tell people, I'm like, you're probably thinking, oh, come on, dude, like that's your mom. Of course your mom said that to you. But she believed it. I could hear it in her
yeah.
voice. And so because she believed it, I believed it. And there's been those moments where I'm like, what the heck am I doing here? Like, I'm kind of struggling. And then I would recall those words. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to keep pressing on because I remember what my mom told me. I promise you, when she told me, I probably rolled my eyes at her, or she probably didn't even know I heard it.
Yeah.
But I did.
Yeah.
I heard it and I remembered and I reflected on it. And so that section of the letter is really bringing hope for the tough situations.
I don't know if you've seen this or read this. Other than all this cool work that I'm doing, I also read a lot of books about parenting and like, raising a daughter with secure attachment. And what kind of comes to mind there is just, our how we talk to our children becomes their inner voice.
Yep.
And your story, and also kind of this call of in this section of the letter, that so much of kind of what comes to mind is really kind of that, and that's true. That really is true.
Well, absolutely. The inner voice, because as they're on social media, not your 2-year-old yet, but as she gets older, and
Yeah.
my kids, we're trying to keep them off of it
Yeah.
forever, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
voices out there that are influencing their inner voice about what's most important, or for their looks. I feel so sorry for our young ladies who are having to compare themselves to all these
Yeah.
other not even real people online and think that that's what they have to look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can start to also build a narrative like, man, I can't do it. And this is honestly one thing that I'm working on with my daughter's inner voice right now. I mean, because she says it
Mm,
out loud, is I can't do it. I can't do it. And I'm
mm.
like, you can do it. And I
Oh.
know you can do it. And I've been talking about the little engine that could. And to be honest, like
Oh, that's
that,
cool.
we talked about that story, as I've been reflecting on, growing up. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, that was like a narrative in my family was you can do it. Like I can
Oh.
do it. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can.
Oh, I
And
love
so now
that.
I'm trying to build that narrative
Thanks for
into,
reminding me of that book because I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, that's a great message,
Well, it's
right?
like if you don't think you can, you're not going to be able to do
Yes.
it. So it starts with believing that you can.
My husband taught me how to ski when we were early on dating. And that was, anyway, so of course he's my husband, but on the mountain, he's my ski instructor. And boy, the first two, honestly, it was more like 3 seasons of learning skiing. I'm such a scaredy cat. But that was, one of his things. Like, if you don't think you can do this, because I would kind of be like, I can't do this. This is way too scary. I don't want to do this. And he's like, well, if that's what you're thinking, you're not going to be able to do it. And
Yeah.
it's so true. It's amazing how that mindset just can impact so much of how we show up, whether it's skiing or just in life. So,
Yeah. I mean, when we started this 4 years ago, you can imagine the insecurity that I felt because I'd
yeah.
never helped someone write a legacy letter. So I'm like, who am I to do this? Like, can I really do this? And I had a business coach, Keith, and Keith believed in me. And Keith kept
Yeah.
encouraging me, no, Blake, you can do this. You're the guy. You're going to figure it out. Keep going. Don't give up. And I tell people I had to borrow Keith's confidence for that first
Yeah.
year. I was living off of Keith.
Yes.
And so we can do this for our children. Like we can look out into the future, we can see what could be true, knowing that along the way there's going to be hard times. Like your daughter's going to have the hardest day of her life. I don't know what it's going to be.
Oh, I
And
know.
things are going to happen to her and it's going to be sad. And things are like that are happening to my kids right now. And on the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal, but it was a big deal that day when somebody said something mean to them at school. And so this is looking out in the future, believing they're going to make it. Now, I'll say this, we're never going to shame our children into who they can become. We can't shame them into it, but we can believe
Yeah.
for them that they're going to get there. And
Yeah.
so that's what we're doing with this letter. And going back to the narratives that we build, especially as a parent, and we're disciplining our children, they didn't get a
Yeah.
good grade, we're trying to help them do better at things. And then somehow the translation can get lost. Like we are believing in them, but they've received a message of he never thinks I can do it right. and
Right.
and so this letter, it's really about getting the story right.
Hmm.
And so this is a sweet story. But there was a guy who wrote this legacy letter to his 3 sons and his adult daughter. And he kind of went into it. He did it with a team of people at work. And he's like, I don't know if I need to write this letter because I mean my kids know that I love them. But he's like, everybody else is doing it, so I'll do it. Well, he got to working on it and he got it. Like he was so proud of his letter. He couldn't wait to give it to him. Gave it Christmas morning, bought some little wooden boxes, put some family heirlooms in each box. His adult sons open it up. Of course, they love to read these things from their dad, like, hey, that he loves them, he's proud of them. But then it was his daughter. She was 31 years old, young mom.
Hmm.
She goes home and she calls back that night, and dad had already gone to bed. So she gets mom. And she says, Mom, this is the best Christmas I've ever had in my life. And mom
Hmm.
goes, well, we love hosting you guys. We love having everybody here. And she goes, no, mom, it was dad's letter. She said, I did not know how much dad really loved me. And this letter
Oh.
brings closure into my life. I thought that he loved my brothers more than me because he's always hunting with them and fishing with them and playing sports. And so I didn't know how much he loved me. And so I asked
Hmm.
Kent, I said, Kent, did you have any idea that your daughter was having these thoughts? And he said, man, I had no idea. He said, the truth is we spent twice as much money on her as we did the boys. But the truth is that we're all telling ourselves a story about how we feel about our loved ones. And they're
Oh.
also telling themselves a story about how you feel about them. And there's just no way that it can match up perfectly. And so this letter is about getting the story right, leaving nothing to doubt. If I ever have a thought, man, did my dad really love me? Yeah, he did. Like I can read it right here. Like he wrote it. I know he loved me.
I love this. So is that, did we go through the steps? Is that it?
Oh yeah, I got sidetracked. So and
I'm
I get
like,
so excited talking about it.
I
And so
love
then the next section, so there's going to communicate, I love you, I'm proud of you, I believe in you. The next section, you're going to share some special memories. And so some people do this and like share 3 or 4 memories in a section. Sometimes people use their memories and put them as illustrations. But this is pretty sweet whenever you're able to say, hey, remember that one time that we did this? Or I remember watching you play Little League, or I remember putting you to bed when you were a toddler. Or I remember the moment that I found
it.
out that I was going to be a mom and how
Oh,
excited I was and how proud I was. Like we know we felt that way, but to make sure that they know that. And so the memory section, and then the last section is the advice section. And so I think a lot of people come into this like, okay, this is going to be a letter of advice. I got to share some advice here. And I tell them, if you're going to lose one section, don't do this section. Like because the other sections are so important. Like I love you, I'm proud of you, I believe in you. Now that being said, the advice section is really important. Like there's a lot of things that you can share with them, and you want to pass down those values, and you have more life experience, you have some wisdom. And so when you do those other sections really well, it sets it up for them to be able to receive this advice that you have for them.
that's so important.
And so it is a pretty incredible exercise to think through, okay, what is my best advice? Like if I was
Mm,
on my deathbed right now and I was thinking about the rest of my life for my children, like what would I want them to know? And so we
mm,
help people think through the advice. And then there is the closing paragraph. In the closing paragraph, you're kind of restating what you said in the intro, but you're also sharing what you want to be true in the future.
mm.
Like if you could spell out like, hey, this is what I would hope for, this is what I want. And I tell people this can be really hard because sometimes what you hope is true is not true today. And you're not sure that what you want is what they want. And so you're kind of putting yourself out there. But I say, this is what we do. Like, this is what we do for the people we love. Like, we take some risks.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
and then I do encourage people. I don't know, you might ever going to ask me this, but I encourage people to give this letter as soon as possible. And so, I got my dad was going to give me that letter that weekend. He knew that his 19-year-old son needed those words, and I did. Looking back, I needed those words sooner. I specifically think of my 7th grade year, like, and I was so insecure. I'm like, yeah, I could have used that letter then. But I just say your children, if they're not currently in a situation, they're about to be in a situation, and they are going to be better off with these words in their life than without them. So let's get them in there as soon as possible.
oh, I love this. And honestly, who better than to share this message than you? Your story, everything you've been through. I just your father's voice, I'm just like all of it is just really it's hit me deeply. And we're having similar conversations like this, but you kind of take it to that next level. So thank you for just your vulnerability of being so open with the your family story, because it's really, I think as a professional, it, of course I serve families and work with families in this way, but everything's so confidential. So, I can't share to that level of detail, but it really hits you where it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, this can really happen to us, to any of us. And anyways, a lot of us are asleep at the wheel, I think.
Yeah, and honestly, it does. We kind of just think we're going to live forever, and maybe it's because of what I do, also because of my dad. But I just hear
Yeah.
stories all the time. A lot of stories I get, man, I lost my mom, I lost my dad, and I looked through the whole house like, surely there's something written down, and there wasn't anything. And to be honest, there's some people out there right now, I've talked to them, that are suffering, and they're not grieving very well because they didn't get the letter. They didn't get something like this. And so this is my mission. Like, we're going to make sure everybody gets a letter like this. And I also believe, and I tell this too, when people are writing their legacy letter, I was like, could you imagine if everybody in your city was writing this letter, or everyone in your state, everyone in the country was writing the letter that you're writing right now, and everybody was about to receive this letter? Like, we would live in a different world. Like I
Mhm.
truly believe that if everyone had a letter like this and everyone truly knew how much they were loved, that they were
Yeah,
believed
this
in.
is where we're speaking the same language. This is why I'm here,
Yeah.
pouring my pouring myself into this podcast because it really can change the world, if we're showing up intentionally and moving from that place of love.
I think about how my dad's letter has completely changed my family tree and
Yeah.
how, and I tell people, like, when you're writing this letter, there's people in your family that have not even been born yet that will be impacted by this letter. I think about my kids, like, my kids are impacted every single day by my dad's letter. They could not tell you a single word that's in this letter, but they're getting a better dad and they're getting a better man because of my dad and his letter.
And I think that the truth is that we do impact. It's just most of us kind of going back to that, example of asleep at the wheel, we don't realize the impact that we have. And so
Oh, yeah.
that's where it's like if we're showing up unconsciously, if we're not speaking loving, kind words, if we're not communicating our love to our children, the legacy of that, even, just using the example of my husband was like, oh yeah, my parents never said I loved you as a child. We shower that. It can't, for both of us to our daughter, but that impacts someone, and their ability to just kind of receive that love.
It does. I mean, we can, all the research shows that, and you can look at all the people, we'll go to the far extreme, like the people in the prison systems. It's like, yeah, they didn't have
Yeah.
somebody in their life that
Yeah.
was loving, and that's where they ended up. They had a lot of trauma, and that's how
Yeah.
they dealt with it. And they made some poor decisions. But then you can also look at people that are successful, and not just necessarily financially successful, but just like successful financially, but also in their relationships, and they're self-aware and they can manage their emotions. They have emotional intelligence, like all these things. So it's like, well, they more than likely had some loving parents.
Yeah.
They communicated it well. It's not
Yeah.
impossible to make it without that. Like you can, it's just so much harder.
It's so much harder. Yeah. And a lot of untangling, a lot of
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to ask you, so when I was reading through the toolkit, there was something that do you know that Hawaiian prayer? Like, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. I don't know if you've heard it, that it's called the Ho'oponopono prayer, but
I don't know if I know that. You have
anyways,
to tell me about it.
yeah, I mean that's basically the prayer. And anyways, there was just a bit of kind of that sentiment I felt like in the background. I know that there's more to the letter than just that, but those seem like themes of, again, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you, conveying. So, anyways, just
I'll have to
it
look it
might be
up.
something that you look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but it's all streams lead to the same, path at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
just knowing also, I was curious if that maybe was something that just knowing that you were in Hawaii and everything with your father. So
No, but I'll look it up.
well, as we wrap up, I did want to just kind of touch on for listeners. So the two major problems that you see that people run into, not finishing the letter
Oh,
and
yeah.
then writing a letter that does more harm than
Oh,
good.
yeah. Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah, I mean, the two big problems that I see people run into, they have the idea, like, I want to write this letter, and then they just never finish it.
Yeah.
And they get stuck. And they're kind of like, okay, what do I write here? And maybe we have a lot of perfectionists out there. And so they want to make this letter
Yeah.
perfect. And I tell people, you're never going to make this letter perfect. And then also, there's been some people who have come and gone through my workshop because they're like, we wrote a letter and it didn't have the result that we wanted. And
Mm,
it's because there's just some key things that you want to put into your letter to help break down those walls, number one. And so there's some things you could say that you have the greatest intentions, but it's not received the way you wanted it to. And so we just make sure that it's received the way that you want it to, and make sure to help to write it in a way that's loving and with
yeah.
humility.
Yeah, not coming from a shaming place.
Yeah.
And is that kind of what we were touching on before of, maybe either starting with giving advice or maybe that's all you're doing in the letter is giving
Yeah,
advice.
lots of advice or maybe some shaming or maybe not taking responsibility, like maybe something has happened and people will blame other people.
Mm,
And I've heard some stories of people like, man, you can't blame other people.
yeah.
Like it was your fault too.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that true? Oh, well, like this conversation has been just so special. I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast and speaking with me and talking to our listeners. As we wrap up our conversation, what would you like to leave listeners with?
Well, anyone can go to legacyletter.com and we got the free toolkit. So we've got the outline, the things that we talked about today, and some other pointers on there. And then if you want to sign up for the masterclass, you can sign up for the masterclass, and it's an online course, and we'll guide you through writing your legacy letter and make sure that you say the things that you want to say.
Oh, I love that. We'll include all of that in the show notes. And you have an awesome day, Blake.
Okay. Thanks for having me on, Sarah.